Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned for these upcoming MMA events. The Contender Series is just around the corner. It actually starts up next Tuesday, and I promise you the MMA Fight Archive will be your one-stop shop to know exactly what to expect when these fighters step foot in the cage on Tuesdays, trying to vie for a UFC contract. There are some pretty good underdog spots often on the Contender Series, and you can get the jump on most people by checking out the MMA Fight Archive, doing your own research, making sure you leave no stone unturned. That's where you guys can check it out, the MMA Fight Archive 7-day free trial. Check the link in the description below. All right, we are going to be going over UFC Vegas 109 this week, which is headlined by a middleweight tilt between Anthony Fluffy Hernandez and Roman Dolidze, who's been streaking a little bit recently. But it's really Hernandez who really wants to prove himself and I believe get his 7th or 8th straight victory in a row and try to cement himself as a true title contender. But he's going to have to get past Roman Dolidze here. Mediocre card overall, let's be honest. There isn't anything to blow your hair back or anything here, but decent card. But what I'm most excited about is to be back in my studio first and foremost. So I appreciate everybody bearing with your boy last weekend as I was visiting family from out of town. Didn't have my setup. Audio was horrible, but the audio is back, sounding nice and golden. But we also got the blinds in across your boy, so I can finally fiddle with the lighting a little bit more. Finally got my studio lights up a little bit. Want to tinker with it a little bit more. I see a little bit of waviness that I'm trying to come to a solution for. So if there's any video folks out there that have some tips for your boy in terms of utilizing OBS and the current setup that I have, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, you know, I'm hoping that once I edit this, the flickering in the background will kind of settle down a little bit. We'll see how it goes. But I'm just happy to get the lighting, the audio, everything looking prime. Very happy about it. Hoping that it continues to look oh so good moving forward. All right, let's quickly go over the lock of the night and dog of the night play for UFC Vegas 108 from this past weekend. We hit on our lock of the night play once again. Esteban Ribovics goes out there. We got him at minus 238. A little bit chalky, but it was a very weird card all around. We're able to profit all in all, which I'm happy about. But we hit the lock of the night play. That now increases our lock of the night record to 39-24 on the year. Absolutely killing it as of late. Back in the profit as well. Dug ourselves out of that minus 45 unit hold that we had at the beginning of the year or earlier in the year. And now here we're back in the profit, and we're going to continue working to our 50 unit goal by the ending of the year. Dog of the night play does not go so well, as we have Nick Klein, who really came out hot and heavy at the beginning. That's what I was expecting him to do. He was close to getting some dominant positions. I wish he'd let the hands go a little bit more rather than kind of just gassing himself out by getting the clinch and the takedown attempts going. But plus 130, you know, not a lot of dogs that I thought were going to hit on the card anyway. There were a few, obviously. Mateusz Rombeski ends up giving it up to Chris Duncan there, but I really thought Nick Klein was going to be one of the better underdogs. He fought for him under early, but was unable to get the job done there. So that now brings our dog of the night record to 36-41 for a 47% hit rate. Still firmly in the profit there considering all the underdogs we've hit. But let's see if we can turn that around this weekend with another underdog hit for you guys. Reminder, we also have 2 other events going down this week, and we have PFL Africa 2, and we have OKTAGON going down this week, and I believe it's OKTAGON 74. I could be off on the number there. Both of those will only be in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. I get it. It's PFL, but it's PFL Africa. It's a regional show. I'll do PFL Europe because they often have big main events, but these regional ones like PFL MENA and PFL Africa, those will only be in written form to help save your boy a little bit of time. If you want to get in on some of those plays and breakdowns, I'll be dropping them later on in the week, so make sure you guys check out the MMALOTN Patreon page. Link for that is in the description below. Should be some sloppy fights there on the Africa card, and we'll try to capitalize on some of those spots and cash some tickets for you guys. So just covering UFC this week on the YouTube page, but on Sunday we will start the Dana White Contender Series breakdowns for you guys. Sundays going to be the Contender Series breakdowns. Mondays will be the MMA Lockcast for the upcoming UFC card. So that will be the schedule moving forward for full card breakdowns. Tuesdays will be top 3 lock of the night plays and chalk or not. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, usual content, quick picks, Lucky Two Step / Lucky Trinity, and then the prop drop for you guys. So that will be the new schedule moving forward. All right. I've set this up a little bit too much. I was excited about the studio, wanted to show it off a little bit, talk a little bit about it, and then obviously all the content that we got coming up. So let's get right into this. I believe it is a 12-fight UFC Vegas 109 card. Right before I hit record here, we got Cody Brundage versus McConico that just got announced. No odds for it as of yet. My early lean is Cody Brundage, but I will do a full breakdown of that for its own video probably on Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. But early lean is Brundage. I got to get through the tape to finalize how I'm feeling about that fight. But early lean, Cody Brundage there. Look for that full fight breakdown tomorrow as its own video. So officially, the first breakdown that we're going to talk about here is Gabriela Fernandes coming in at -400, going up against Yulia Stoliarenko, who comes in at +300 in this women's flyweight clash. Now, starting off on the Fernandes side of things, she did start her UFC career 0-2, losing to grapplers like Jasmine Jasdu-Vicious and Teresa Bleda, but she was able to turn it around and get a split decision victory over Carly Judice. Very close fight. The power and emphatic shots of Fernandes were the difference maker compared to the volume and output from the Judice side of things. And then against Kong Wang, it was not looking good for Fernandes, but she ended up pulling off one of the biggest upsets of 2024 when she clubbed and subbed Kong Wang in the second round of that matchup. And it showed some solid fight IQ from her after knowing she had Wang hurt. She jumped on that rear naked choke almost instantly, and it was just a matter of time before the wobbled and dazed Kong Wang was going to be put out, and that's exactly what happened. Fernandes is normally a good striker that likes to move around at distance, throw good combinations. She has good head kicks as well, good and decent volume, has some decent pop on her shots considering some of the athleticism and explosiveness we've seen from her in the past, but the ground game is often where she struggles, and she's going to be facing it here against Yulia Stoliarenko. Luckily for Fernandes, Stoliarenko not the best wrestler, not the best with securing takedowns, and we saw that on display last time around against Luana Carolina. That fight was back in February of 2024, so we're talking about over a year-and-a-half layoff for Stoliarenko, looking to come back and get back to her submission ways. 10 of her 11 victories have come by armbar, which is why I often call her the Lithuanian Ronda Rousey, because she's so good in terms of getting those judo throws, getting those takedowns, and then snatching up armbars and forcing opponents to tap. Will she be able to do that here against Fernandes? I'm thinking not. I think Fernandes is a little bit more physical, a little bit stronger, and she should be able to tread the cage well enough, pick apart Stoliarenko, leading to an eventual knockout victory. But I know those knockout victories, we see those knockout victories on we see those knockout losses on Stoliarenko's record there, but historically she's difficult to put away. You have to get her to the ground. You have to stay away from the arm bars and just ground and pound her. On the feet, it's kind of hard to get her out of there, but if you're able to pin her to the ground like Luana Carolina did, that's how they were able to get them out of there. So Fernandes is going to have to land a very clean head kick to try to put Stoliarenko away. I think she wins this matchup, but I don't have as much confidence to lay that -400 on her. Maybe look at the Fernandes by KO prop if it's juicy enough. It's probably going to be minus money if we're being honest. The under 2.5 is -180, so I'm assuming Fernandes by knockout would be -150, -200. But I think Fernandes wins. I think she gets the knockout, but I'd be a little bit hesitant in terms of some of the chalky spots or chalky lines on some of those props. All right. Next up, we got a welterweight clash between Uros Medic going up against Gilbert Urbina. We got -450 on Medic and +350 the return on Urbina. Now, starting off on the Medic side of things, he was supposed to go out there and beat Punahele Soriano. I think he was the slight favorite that night, but he ended up getting clipped pretty quickly by the power puncher and put out shortly thereafter. Now, Medic is a guy that I've often been very low on in the past, kind of discrediting his run before coming to the UFC, and he's proven me wrong a few times. I remember the Omar Morales fight. I think I had Morales as a lock of the night play that night. Medic was able to pull off the upset there. Even the Semmelsberger fight, I thought Semmelsberger would be able to take Medic's best shot and come back at him. But Medic ended up, I thought Semmelsberger would be able to take Medic's best shot and come back, but it was Medic who ended up getting the third round knockout there. And that was the only time that Medic has seen a third round in his, 13 fight career. Most often, he's finishing fights or getting finished in that first round, just like he did against Soriano. He's very aggressive with his Muay Thai, trains out of King's MMA in California, originally from Alaska. Decent striking, decent power on his shots. He just needs to tighten things up a little bit in the striking defense room. Medic will surely be facing some long-range weapons here from Urbina, who's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage as well as a 2-inch height advantage. Urbina normally looks to pick his opponents apart from distance, has a good teep kick up the middle, lands straight shots down the pipe, counters very well, but you have to wonder about his durability as and even ability to kind of implement that style against guys that are going to be looking to take his head off. Seeing what happened with him and Charles Radke was a big red flag for me, as I thought that Urbina was going to be the better striker there, and Radke kind of just took command of that fight from jump and didn't allow Urbina to have any success in that fight, leading to Radke getting that finish in the last minute of that first round there. Urbina has not been in action since that matchup, which was I believe February of 2024. It might have even been February of 2024. So it's been a long time since he's been inside the cage, and he's going up against an aggressive fighter like Medic here. Medic at minus 450 is never a betting spot for me. I don't care who he's going up against. Just as we saw in his Soriano fight, he can be clipped, he can be hurt, and he can be put away. But I think it's going to be Medic who ends up landing those big shots on Urbina here, and I think he ends up getting him out of there. But the line that's most intriguing to me is the under 1.5, which is currently sitting around minus 160. I think the aggressiveness of Medic is going to bring it out of Urbina, whether it causes Urbina to land that big counter to put Medic away, or it just breaks Urbina and Medic is able to get him out of there within a round and a half as well. So I'd be a little bit skeptical in terms of taking the minus 450 on Medic. Super chalky. Even his KO prop, I think, is up there around that minus 200 line. I would just take that under 1.5 in case Urbina can land a big shot of his own. But the prediction is going to be Medic by knockout, but I think it all happens under 1.5 rounds. All right. Moving on over to the women's bantamweight division now, where we got Jocelyn Edwards coming in at minus 305, going up against Priscilla Cachoeira, who comes in at plus 255. Now, Edwards is riding a 2-fight winning streak, but not only a 2-fight winning streak, a streak where she's finished both of those opponents. The first of which was against Tamiris Vidal, where she was able to just outpoint her, just slow her down, and then eventually submit her in the dying seconds of the third round. And then last time around, she got a takedown right off jump against Chelsea Chandler, which a lot of people thought the other thing would happen, that it would be Chandler seeking the takedowns, but Edwards showcased good takedowns there. Once the fight got back to the feet, Edwards took command and knew that she had a tremendous striking advantage there, and that allowed her to throw with such confidence that she was able to knock out Chandler in the first round of that matchup. Edwards is a fighter that has firmly entrenched herself beside flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko. She was there for all of her Alexa Grasso training camps, really just sinking into that grapple heavy style that Shevchenko has really started to take at this stage of her career. And it's starting to show in Edwards' game. We already know she has an aggressive BJJ game. She's mainly known for her high output volume striking style, but now seeing the confidence in her and the power in which she's throwing with, I think that's giving her the confidence to go out there and finish these girls, even though the first 8 fights that she had in her UFC career all went to the scorecards. I think we're seeing a new side of her now where she may not get into title contention anytime soon, or ever, but she should be able to go out there and wipe out the girls that are outside of the rankings. And I think she has a pretty good matchup here against Cachoeira, which is why I believe she's such a big favorite. Now, Cachoeira was able to stay away from a 3-fight losing streak last time around as she went out there and landed a big knockout over Josiane Nunes, landing a perfect uppercut to flatline Nunes and win that fight, I believe pulling off a small upset that night. But it's fighters that have been able to take her to the ground that have success against her. Miranda Maverick, Jasmine Jasdovicius, both of those fighters finding submissions against Cachoeira and getting her out of there. And I think, unfortunately for her, she's going to be facing a similar style here in Edwards, who's really just coming to that grappling game and knowing that she can have success there against Cachoeira. I fully expect Edwards to push that pressure, counter the wide winging strikes of Cachoeira, maybe with counters of her own, or even level changes and eventually getting the fight to the ground, because Cachoeira doesn't really have a good takedown defense game, and I think that's where Edwards is going to make her pay a lot. So I'm looking for Edwards to smother her immediately, break her down, and eventually find that submission within 2 rounds. You know, the under 2.5 is currently sitting around plus 150, all the way up to plus 175, depending on which site you're looking at. But I think that this is a great spot for Edwards to really put it on Cachoeira and find that finish and continue this dominant run that she's been on as of late. So I'm going to go Edwards and Edwards by submission. Haven't seen the prop for that. If that's anywhere, you know, north of plus 600, plus 700, I may look to sprinkle that as well. But I think Edwards gets the finish here and continues this run. And I think it happens under 2.5 rounds. All right, next up, we got a men's bantamweight matchup here where we got Elijah Smith coming in at minus 700, going up against Toshiomi Kazama, who comes in at plus 500. Now, Smith pretty much undefeated since I believe it was his 3rd professional fight, where he went up against Reyes Cortez, which is the brother of UFC flyweight Tracy Cortez. He even had a Contender Series fight before that fight with Elijah Smith, came up short against Christian Rodriguez, but Smith has been undefeated since then. You know, I believe it's a 5 or 6 fight winning streak at this point in time. Very solid fighter. His father, BJJ black belt and former tough competitor Gilbert Smith, has pretty much been honing Elijah's skills since he was a child, which is why Smith has become so successful, made it to the UFC, and had a very good fight in his UFC debut against Vince Morales just a few months back. That night, he was able to have a very hot start, landing better strikes, showcasing his speed and slick striking approach. Then he had to deal with a little bit of adversity in that second round, fighting off a lot of those front chokes that Morales was trying to clamp onto. But it was clear that Smith had drilled that throughout his camp, knowing that that was Morales' only way to win that fight. And he showed great defense, great poise, great patience, especially for a fighter that's only 22 years old. It was a great look for Smith to defend off on that. And then in the 3rd round, get back to his striking advantage, really bust up Vince Morales. I think he busted his nose maybe a minute into that 3rd round, and he was able to get the decision victory that night. I'd like to see him continue to improve his cardio management, his energy management. You know, I have seen him slow down later on in fights, but if he continues to really just mesh his game and manage his gas tank a little better, he's going to continue to grow at an exponential rate. But I just hope that the UFC brings him on nice and slow. He's only 22 years old. There is no rush. Continue to give him these guys outside of the rankings. Let him build his resume and experience, and he'll be for sure a guy that could be contending for a title in the next, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years. 6 is maybe a stretch. I'd say 4 to 5 years. This is a guy that has the skills to do that. He's going up against Toshiomi Kazama, who had a very rough start to his UFC career. Now, his fight against Rinya Nakamura was actually the finals of the 2023 Road to UFC tournament. I believe it was either 2022 or 2023. Got knocked out immediately. Just as we saw what Nakamura was able to do this past weekend in Nathan Fletcher, Kazama got it even worse. Then he ended up getting knocked out by Garrett Armfield after he was unable to get to the BJJ game, and ended up, we know his striking defense is just not good. In his last fight against Charalampos Grigoriou, we saw him get to his grappling immediately. Within the first 3, 4, 5 seconds of that fight, he was in on a takedown attempt on Grigoriou, trying to get those takedowns up against the cage. He got a few. He was able to get some dominant positions, but he's very submission over position, which often causes him to end up on his back. But he has great reversals. Just very crafty BJJ, often looking to get those submissions and get his opponents out of there. It's on the feet where there's a lot of issues in his game. And even in the second round of that fight against Grigoriou, who was clearly huffing and puffing after that first round, he was able to drop Kazama badly. But thanks to the poor fight IQ from Grigoriou, he followed Kazama to the ground, tried following up with some ground and pound, but Kazama was able to find moments to really catch his breath, get his wits about him, and then eventually pull off that triangle choke to force the tap from Grigoriou. That was the first official win for the Japanese fighter. Kazama is a solid BJJ specialist, but it's really bridging the gap between striking and getting the fight to the ground. And unfortunately for him, every MMA fight starts in the striking realm. He needs to get better wrestling. He needs to get better judo. It's just not cutting it out for him at the UFC level. He's going to have to rely on guys making those fight IQ mistakes, just like Grigoriou did last time around. So here against Elijah Smith, I get why Smith is minus 700. If Kazama is somehow able to finagle his way to the mat, he might be able to snatch onto a submission and force the tap. But I think Smith will do a good enough job in terms of utilizing his footwork, his takedown defense, and then his slick striking approach to land those big shots on Kazama, drop him a few times, and I would be mystified if Smith follows him to the ground to try to finish him. Let him back to his feet, let go with the shots, find the knockout, get him out of there that way. I like Smith. I like Smith by knockout, minus 210 on that KO prop. A little bit wide for my liking, but I do think that is going to end up being the outcome for this fight. So I'm going to go Smith and Smith by knockout. A lot of chalk on this card, by the way. I don't think there's anybody below minus 200 on this entire fight card. So we'll see which underdogs we can pick out for you guys. All right, next up. Light heavyweights up next, where we got Julius Walker coming in at minus 600, going up against Rafael Cerqueira, who comes in at plus 425. Now, Walker is coming off of that split decision loss to Alonzo Menafield in his UFC debut, which I believe was on short notice, but he made his presence felt right away. He got in on a few takedown attempts against Menafield, broke off, landed some big shots, hurt Menafield a few times, but then I think he underestimated Alonzo Menafield's takedown defense because it really seemed like he zapped his own energy trying to get those takedowns, and then when Menafield was able to get back into open space, he landed a few big shots that hurt Walker, had some good clinch success of his own, utilizing his physicality as he normally does, but I think that was a great learning experience for the 7-fight veteran Julius Walker, who's now going to be looking to build his way back up the light heavyweight rankings. He's athletic, he's fast, he's powerful, has some decent wins on the regional scene. He's beat former UFC fighter Bevon Lewis, former Tough alumni Myron Dennis, finished all those guys. I believe he's finished all of his wins in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. Actually, one of those fights actually leaked into the second round, and that one only lasted another minute and a half. He has potential. He's 26. At light heavyweight and heavyweight, athleticism will go a far way, and I think Julius Walker has a lot of that. Now, it's just getting those technical aspects of his game to round out so that he can be successful and try to break into the top 10 of the light heavyweight division. And I think the UFC is giving him a softball here in Rafael Cerqueira, which is why I think this minus 600 line is very justified. Let's quickly touch on Cerqueira, who was supposed to be on the Contender Series, I believe, last season. After numerous pullouts, the UFC decided to just give him a short notice UFC debut against Ibo Aslan, and that was probably the worst debut we've ever seen. We saw Cerqueira throw no offense. He got stalked from jump, and Ibo Aslan finally let go with some shots about 40 seconds into that fight and got the quick knockout there. We saw a little bit more offense from Cerqueira. Well, anything would have been a little bit more than what he showed in the Aslan fight, but a little bit more offense against Bukauskas, landed a few shots from range, showcasing his length, 76-inch reach, 6'3" height as well. But once Bukauskas landed a few clean shots, it seemed like Cerqueira wanted out of there, and that's the big issue in his game. He almost looks for the exit anytime he gets hit cleanly. He has some decent BJJ at times, but he doesn't look to chase that, whereas he often just looks to pick opponents apart from distance. But the issue is the competition that he faced on the regional scene, which is why he went undefeated, was very low level. He's going out there and finishing these guys very quickly. I think he finished all but one of them and it's not helping him out in the UFC now that he's actually fighting resistance. And to go up against a guy like Julius Walker, where, you know, he has nearly double the professional MMA experience, but the strength of schedule there is just not there at all, actually, for Cerqueira. And I think that's what's going to cause him issues here against Walker again. I think Walker, if he has it his way, he can just go forward, throw big shots. He's going to land a few, and I think one of those ends up putting Cerqueira down. I tried giving Cerqueira the benefit of the doubt in his last matchup. This guy's not good. He's just no bueno, not good. And I think Walker has the chops to go out there, put it on him quickly, get him out of there. If I can get round 1 KO for Walker at anything better than plus 100, I'd probably shoot on that. But this should be an easy fight for Walker. There's no way he loses this fight. I'd be surprised. I'd be stunned if he fumbles the bag here. So give me Walker, and Walker by knockout. All right. Middleweights up next, another chalky favorite where we got Hernandez coming in at plus 415, going up against the Brit Christian Leroy Duncan, who comes in at minus 565. We'll start off on the Anders side of things, who's actually on a 2-fight winning streak. Last time around, he was pretty much beating Chris Weidman the entire time, outside of getting dropped halfway in that first round and then grinded out for the rest of it. But he came on strong in the second round. He forced Chris Weidman to jump guillotine, which was a horrible decision from the All-American. And Anders just absolutely thumped on him for the rest of that second round. Landed a total of 109 total strikes in that second round, getting the eventual mercy stoppage from the referee. I have no idea what Chris Weidman was complaining about. You know, you can't eat that many unanswered shots and expect the referee to let you keep going. Anders just put it on him. You know, he felt Weidman breaking. He felt the resistance being less and less as the minutes went by, and then he was able to muster up that finish there. But Anders, 38 years old, a guy that's really not, you know, achieved the potential that a lot of people expected from him. You know, this was a guy within his, I believe it was within his first 4 or 5 fights, he was headlining a fight night card in Brazil against Lyoto Machida. I believe he ended up losing that fight anyway, but still, like, it was not a good look for him since that, where he's really struggled throughout his career to try to get some consistency and some success. He's been gym hopping a lot, but recently it seems like he settled back at in his hometown in Alabama, opened up his own gym as well, and it seems like he's just settling into the twilight of his career. Now, he's going up against a young, hungry kid, and, well, I guess kid is the wrong word. A man now, 30 years old, Christian Leroy Duncan, looking to build upon his victory from earlier this year against Andrei Pulyev, where he pretty much bullied Pulyev up against the cage, landed a lot of good dirty boxing, some good knees. When they were out at distance, he utilized his speed and explosivity to land those big shots on Pulyev. Got a 10-8 in the third round on at least one judge's scorecard. And that's Duncan's style. He likes to utilize his physicality, likes to break out into space, get off on some big shots, and then get back into the clinch to try to stay safe, and then muster up the energy again to kind of rinse and repeat that style. And he's really had to mature his style since coming to the UFC, right? The loss to Armin Petrosian really opened up his eyes, and then we saw a little bit more of a methodical approach for him when he fought Dennis Tuliulian and Claudio Ribeiro, but then he, really started to falter against the grappling of Gregory Rodriguez. I think he learned from that fight. I think this is a matchup where we'll see him really put it on Anders. Anders could have some success in the clinch and the grappling realm, but I don't think it's going to be sustained for too long. I think it's just a matter of time before Duncan starts utilizing his speed and power advantage. And just as we saw Chris Weidman drop Eric Anders, I'm fully expecting Duncan to do the same here. I think he lands a big shot. I think he puts Anders away within 2 rounds. Minus 565, a little bit wide for me, but if you can get that KO prop around that plus 200 line, I think that's the best way to go here. So I'm going to go Duncan and Duncan by knockout. All right, next up in the bantamweight fight here, we got Miles Johns coming in at plus 250, going up against Gene Matsumoto, who comes in at minus 300. Now, Miles Johns is a guy that I've been quite big on throughout his career, but it seems like we're starting to see him hit his ceiling. I give him props for switching up the training camp, going to Marathon MMA, where Trey Ogden has done a great job in terms of game planning for certain opponents and executing those game plans, even himself as a fighter. but as a coach, he's done a great job in terms of instilling it into his fighters. But we saw in the Filipe Lima fight for Miles Johns, there are just going to be some fighters that just haven't beat technically, haven't beat skill-wise, are able to kind of shut down his game no matter what he tries to implement, and then he's just forced to try to find the knockout to try to get the win. But we know his gas tank has always been a bit of an issue later on in fights. We saw Filipe Lima pretty much just sweep him on the scorecards. He outstruck him. His takedown defense held up so that he forced Johns to strike with him, and then he was able to get off on better combinations and better damage to continuously hurt Johns throughout the 15 minutes there. Johns, fast, explosive, has some power, has some decent wrestling. His control is not the greatest. His cardio is not the greatest, and that's where better fighters will be able to expose him and get the better of him. And unfortunately for Johns, I think he's facing somebody here and Gene Matsumoto who can do the same thing that Filipe Lima did. Now, Matsumoto had his undefeated run snap last time around by split decision against Rob Font. That ended his 16-fight winning streak. 16-0 record is now 16-1. Matsumoto had a solid start to the UFC, his UFC career, getting that submission victory over Dan Argueta, getting that decision over Brad Katona. Very close fight there, but we saw some good things from Matsumoto. But the Rob Font one rubs me wrong. You know, he was a -190 favorite going into that fight. I thought that was a fight that he could win pretty clearly. But it was, I believe it was that first exchange that kind of really put the fight in Rob Font's favor. We can clearly say Rob Font won round 3, without a doubt. We can say Matsumoto won round 2, without a doubt. Came down to round 1. Now, if you guys remember, Rob Font, you know, they go for the glove touch, and as soon as he glove touches him, he lands a 1-2 down the pipe on Matsumoto that clearly rocks and wobbles Matsumoto, and from there, Rob Font starts going for takedowns and really applying that clinch pressure. And it took Matsumoto about 2 to 2.5 minutes to really clear the cobwebs from that shot that he ate and get his wits back about him. And then once he did, he was able to land a takedown on Rob Font, and I thought he did sufficient enough damage from that top position to warrant the round going back in his favor, but 2 judges ended up giving that first round to Rob Font. All 3 judges giving Rob Font round 3 as well. Hence, Gene Matsumoto losing that fight by split decision. If he didn't get rocked off jump there, if he didn't get caught off guard, and again, it's a fight. Protect yourself at all times. It is what it is. But it is an unwritten rule to do that, what Rob Font did with that glove touch there, or lack of glove touch. But if that initial sequence did not happen, Matsumoto probably wins that fight. You can't say it without a doubt. Obviously, we have to give credit to Rob Font for being able to follow up that shot with the cage pressure and cage clinch, but I think he really benefited from Matsumoto being caught off guard and wobbled by that first shot. I'm a big fan of Matsumoto. 25 years old. He had a very solid run on the regional scene on his way to the Contender Series, where he had a very tough matchup in Casey Tanner that he was able to overcome. Very nasty Muay Thai, stays very active with his leg kicks. His takedown defense has improved immensely. He's even implemented some offensive wrestling of his own, which is great. But I think him at his best is just picking opponents apart with his striking. He has a good front choke series as well that he can implement. And I really think he just counters the explosivity of Johns here with combinations, stays consistent on that leg kick, picks Miles Johns apart, and I think he ends up beating him on the scorecards. Maybe a finish transpires at a certain point, but I think for the most part, Matsumoto stays disciplined, stays within himself, picks apart Miles Johns, and sweeps him on the scorecards. All right, next up, we got Andre Fili going up against Christian Rodriguez in this featherweight matchup. We got plus 205 on Andre Touchy Fili, minus 240 on C-Rod Christian Rodriguez. Now, start off on the Fili side of things, who has, consistently been inconsistent. And what I mean by that is he has never had 2 straight losses or 2 straight wins in over 5 years. He is now 12-11 in the UFC since joining the promotion back in 2013. Last time around, pretty much putting himself into a guillotine against Melquizai El Costa and tapping out at the ending of that first round. Was having some good success in the striking realm. Nothing crazy. Both guys were really just trying to feel each other out still. But then Fili was, gets the takedown. Costa fishes for the guillotine and then ends up forcing the tap there. Fili's very flaky, very inconsistent, very tough to trust. He has an unorthodox striking game. He has some decent grappling if he needs to lean on it. But there are guys that will can be just better overall fighters than him, right? Nathaniel Wood was able to get the better of him. Dan Ige gets the knockout there. Malkozai Costa gets the submission. Very close fight against Cub Swanson to get the decision victory there. Kind of surprised he knocked out Lucas Almeida, but again, that's kind of the wild card nature of trying to predict and bet Andre Fili fights. Some days he'll show up, some days he'll just get caught in a guillotine, right? That's kind of just the case with him. So it's very tough to predict his fights and bet his fights. Now, he's going up against C-Rod, Christian Rodriguez, who is, the lighter weight version of Kelvin Gastelum and maybe more talented than Kelvin Gastelum. He's a very slick striker, very good kickboxing, came up under the Rufus Sport banner since he was a kid. You go back and watch his amateur fights, and this guy already looks like a polished fighter that was ready for the UFC. Slick submission game, good scrambling, good cardio, but made some fight IQ mistakes in his last couple of fights. His last 3 wins, I believe, have come over guys with a combined record of 35-0. I think it was his last 3 wins. Isaac Dalgarian, Austin Bashi, Cameron Simon, going out there and showcasing that he was a very tough out. Even Raul Rosas Jr. I think Christian Rodriguez was his first loss. Julian Erosa ends up catching the guillotine against Christian Rodriguez, forces a tap there. But Julian Rosa has done that against a couple guys now. And then last time around for Christian Rodriguez, very surprising to me. I was surprised that he went for the takedowns as much as he did. I think that gassed him out a little bit sooner than it should have, but not completely, because he clearly had a very good third round for all the 3 judges to score that round in his favor. But, I felt like he expended too much energy in that first round trying to get Costa to the ground. Whereas if he just trusted his striking, I think it would have paid off for him much better. We saw him hurt Costa a few times in that third round. Didn't wobble or drop him or anything like that, but he landed some clean shots. And if he brought that type of confidence with the striking early, he would have gotten, or he probably wouldn't have finished Costa, but he probably could have won that first round and then gone on to continue that momentum through the rest of the fight. So I hope he learns from that. He's often going to be undersized at 145 pounds, and that's kind of where I draw the Kelvin Gastelum comparison, is that he is a 135er, but he just can't make the weight. He's that tweener between 135 and 145. Maybe he'd be a champion of a 140-pound division, but at 145 pounds, it's going to be hard for his power to translate against these bigger guys that he's facing. Like here against Andre Fili, he's at a 4-inch height disadvantage as well as a 3-inch reach disadvantage. And that's why I can't just muster up the confidence to be willing to pay the chalk on Christian Rodriguez. Now, from what I'm hearing, Andre Fili seems to be a live dog this week from a lot of people. It seems like a lot of people are going to be on the Fili side, and that could bring that Rodriguez line down to a bettable spot. I would bet Rodriguez closer to minus 185, between that minus 150, minus 185 spot. I think it's bettable. I think he is the better technical fighter all around. I think he can touch up Fili. I think he can out-grapple Fili. It's just the size advantage of Fili that gives me some issues here. So I'm going to pick Rodriguez still. So much so that I actually think Rodriguez will find that submission. I think he's going to look to maybe get a club and sub here. Maybe he mixes in a takedown at an opportune moment. And then from there, I think he can get a slick front head series. He has a good Darce choke, Anaconda choke. Maybe he gets that here on Fili. But I just think he's the better fighter. Just plain and simple. So I'm going to go Rodriguez. I'm going to go Rodriguez by submission as well. Let's just wait for that line to come down a little bit first. All right, next up in the women's strawweight division, we got Yasmin Lucindo coming in at minus 205, going up against Angela Overkill Hill, who comes in at plus 175. Now, Lucindo is looking to bounce back after her most recent UFC loss at the hands of Amanda Lemos. I believe it was a 4-fight winning streak for Lucindo after she had lost her UFC debut against Jasmine Yadagui. But she put together a solid run, beating Brogan Walker-Sanchez, Poliana Vienna, Karolina Kovacevic, and Marina Rodriguez. But it was really that Rodriguez fight where we start to see a couple of the flaws in Lucindo's game. If she can't get those takedowns, she really starts to struggle, and that's where opponents are able to get the better of her on the feet. She still seems a little bit hesitant there. She throws some decent kicks, but she needs to set up her takedowns well for her to get those takedowns and eventually control her opponents. Luckily for her, Rodriguez had almost no takedown defense and no get-ups, which led to Lucindo, surviving some of the striking exchanges by going for takedowns and end up winning that fight there. Then against Amanda Lemos, she was the one that was getting taken down. Lemos was showcasing her physicality and strength, taking Lucindo to the ground and easily grinding her out in those first 2 rounds. Then it seemed like Lemos's gas tank issues started to catch up with her. Lucindo had some good success in that 3rd round, but by then it was too little too late for her to get the win. So I think it was just too big of a jump for her to go from, kind of struggling against Marina Rodriguez to go up against a former title challenger like Amanda Lemos. Now she's taking on a veteran in Angela Hill, who's going to be looking to test her even more in the striking realm. But I think Lucindo, 23 years old, slowly improving, working with a high-level grappler like Verna Janjidoba. That's Lucindo's style. She wants to take opponents to the ground, utilize a BJJ-heavy approach, maybe look for submissions, but try to keep that control as best as possible. But she has to work on the control, and she needs to work on better takedown entries. She's going to have to do it here against Angela Hill, who even at 40 years old has been showing tremendous improvements throughout her game. There was a stint in which she went 1-5 between 2020 and 2022, and three of those 5 losses were actually by split decision as well, so possible that she could have won a few of those fights. But she's now 5-2 over her last 7 fights, most recently coming out against Ketlin Souza by split decision. Very close fight, probably could have gone as Ketlin Souza, but Angela Hill, she's been screwed plenty of times, so I'm sure she was happy to take that split decision there. But good striking, as we obviously know. She utilizes good combinations, good footwork, good volume as well. But what's really improved in her game has been her takedown defense and ability to even use it her own, right? Going for her own takedowns and getting some control time herself. Seeing how many close fights she's had throughout her career, I think she's finally realized that maybe if I start seeking takedowns and getting some control time of my own, I can mix that up well enough with my kickboxing and Muay Thai, and that might be a better look for the judges to end up winning some of these fights. She's going to be up against it here in Lucindo, who's going to be clearly looking to take this fight to the ground. But if Hill continues to showcase some of the takedown defense and the urgency in working back to her feet, she can really nullify that control of Lucindo by landing volume and combinations of her own, where Lucindo starts to look a little bit lost. So, out of the super chalk heavy card that we have here, I think that Hill is probably one of the better underdogs on this entire card to pull off the upset. It all comes down to her urgency when this fight inevitably gets into the grappling room. We know Lucindo wants to take her down, but if Hill can stop a few takedowns, work back to her feet quickly enough, and touch Lucindo up with her volume, she will make this fight a lot closer, and I think she'll be able to pull off the upset and win this fight on the scorecards. All right. Co-main event, somewhat short notice for both guys here. Steve Erceg was originally supposed to fight Alex Perez on this card. Then he was supposed to fight Hyun Sung Park. Then Hyun Sung Park obviously stepped in to fight Tatsuro Taira this past weekend. Thus, Ode Osbourne steps in to fight Steve Erceg in this co-main event opportunity. Minus 550 on the former title challenger Steve Erceg, plus 400 on Ode Osbourne, who saved his job with a victory last time around. But let's start off on the Steve Erceg side of things, who's really had a tale of 2 UFC careers, just since last year. Made his UFC debut, had a 3-fight winning streak, finishing that off with a nasty knockout victory over Matt Schnell. And given the state of the flyweight division, he was given a flyweight title shot against Alexandre Pantoja back in May of last year, and it was a very close fight. There were a few rounds where Pantoja was able to get control and grind those rounds out, but that final round, I thought it was 2-2, and I believe most judges believed it was 2-2 going into that final round. But Steve Erceg played around a little bit too much in the grappling realm, allowing Pantoja to scramble and get those dominant positions, whereas if Erceg was a little bit more cautious about the grappling, he could have picked apart Pantoja a little bit more, and he may have won the title that night had he landed a little bit more damage and stayed away from the grappling in that 5th round. I think it was his problem and his flaw for actually initiating some of the grappling sequences in that last round that led to him losing. So, seeing the shock on his face when he heard the scorecards, knowing that he was just 1 round away from winning, I think he would have changed things in that 5th round had he believed he was a little bit closer on the scorecards. Then he ended up getting knocked out by Kara France a couple months later, and then last time around taking a short notice main event in March against Brandon Moreno. couldn't get anything going there. Showcased good footwork, but just not enough output. And Moreno was the one landing more significant shots and making it look better for the judges, at least for 4 out of the 5 rounds there to get that decision victory over Erceg. Erceg's still 30 years old. I know he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but this kid is still very talented. Usually showcases very good Muay Thai. He's a BJJ black belt, very well-rounded. Just needs to tighten things up a little bit more with the defensive side of things. Maybe up the output a little bit more, just like in that Brandon Moreno fight. That's probably what could have made that a little bit more competitive. But he still has the capabilities of eventually getting back to a flyweight title shot if he can string 3-4 wins together and actually make them look dominant as well. Now he's going up against Osbourne, who I've been very low on throughout his career. I felt like he's been very overrated. I was able to cash numerous times against him. I believe Almabayev I was able to cash a big ticket against. Jafel Filio, Ronaldo Rodriguez, close fight, but I got a lock of the night play there to cash on Rodriguez at Noche UFC last year. And then I had a lock of the night play on Luis Gurul, I believe at -230. And it was looking good in the first round. Gurul was dominating for the most part. And then in the second round, he kind of struggled to get a hold of Osbourne. And then he started to get a little bit lazy with his output and his volume. And that allowed Osbourne to land a perfect counter down the pipe to drop Gurul, follow up with a couple big shots, and get the TKO victory that night. Osbourne, 33 years old. I think we've seen his ceiling, but we do have to give respect to the power that he possesses, especially at flyweight, his speed and his length. But if you can get him to the ground, we've seen him get grinded out by most of his opponents. That's where guys can get the better of him. All 3 of his last losses, I believe, came due to him not having much of an answer off of his back, and which is why he lost the first round on all 3 scorecards in his fight against Gurul. Will Erceg take that route? That's not usually how we see him fight. He usually likes to get his Muay Thai going and try to get the rest of his game going behind that. But we have to be wary about the power coming back from the Osbourne side of things and the speed advantage that Osbourne could have in this fight, which is why it makes me a little bit sketched out to see Erceg at -550. I think he wins, but I think he should be closer to that -200, -230 line rather than, 85% indicated here. Osbourne has that kill shot to put him down. But Erceg, slightly cleaner, a little bit more technical, but we have seen him get caught. Kai France, Brandon Moreno was able to touch him up a few times. Who's to say Osbourne can't land a big shot down the pipe and hurt Erceg badly? I saw Osbourne KO round 1, Osbourne KO round 2, and at some astronomical numbers. Those may be worth a little bit of a sprinkle, but I'm still going to go Erceg to win this fight by decision. I just think he's more technical all around. If he can mix in the grappling enough here and there to keep Osbourne on his toes, he should be able to wear Osbourne down and win this fight on the scorecards, but do not overlook the danger that Osbourne provides. I learned the hard way last time around with Luis Gurul, and I'm sure Erceg is a little bit better than Gurul at this stage of their careers, but you can't overlook the danger that Osbourne provides here. So I'm going to go Erceg by decision, but I might sprinkle those KO round 1, KO round 2 props for Osbourne, considering how crazy they are. All right, main event of the evening goes down in the middleweight division, where we got the streaking Roman Dolidze coming in at +270, going up against more of a streaker here. Sounds wrong. Somebody that is streaking even more is what I should have said than Roman Dolidze. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez coming in at -330. And I can keep glowing about Hernandez, but I want to start off with the red corner. I want to start off with Dolidze here. Had a 2-fight losing streak against Marvin Vettori and Nasruddin Imavov, but has managed to bounce back with a domination of Anthony Smith, which what I believe was a short notice light heavyweight matchup for both guys to try to fill out one of those pay-per-view cards. Then he got that, caused Kevin Holland to get a rib injury in their matchup. And then he had a main event victory over Marvin Vettori to even the score there with the Italian, pretty much biting down on his mouthpiece a little bit harder, throwing with a little bit more power over the course of 25 minutes and winning that fight by decision. Outside of a little scare in round 3, Dolidze was pretty much in control of that matchup from jump. Just such a weird fighter. Technically speaking, he does a lot of things wrong, but he just loves to fight. He loves to bite down on his mouthpiece and cause pocket exchanges, tries to land with bigger power. His durability has helped him a lot throughout his career. He has a crafty jiu-jitsu game, just as we saw with what he did against Jack Hermanson. But this is a guy, almost of the Dricus du Plessis elk, or ilk, I should say. they're not great fighters, but they still find ways to win. And that's the case with Dolidze. He's just so aggressive and just manages to like break some of his opponents to get those wins. But again, guys like Anthony Smith are kind of breakable. Marvin Vettori, kind of pillow-fisted, if we're being honest. And then Kevin Holland, good fighter, but there have been some flaky moments with him as well. But it's going to be tough for him to do that against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who is finally getting the due that I believe he deserves. Outside of those early losses to Marcus Perez and Kevin Holland, he's been absolutely streaking as of late. In February, he marked his 7th straight victory where he was able to outwork and outpoint Brendan Allen, getting his 2nd victory over Brendan Allen and winning that fight. Just showcasing his smothering, high-pressure, high-pace style, working Brendan Allen through the mat. Everything that he's done against Marc-Andre Barriault, Edmund Shabazi, and Roman Kopylov, the 5-round performance of a career that we saw him put against Michel Pereira. Close first round, but after that, it was all Anthony Hernandez, and he doesn't care if his opponents are able to work back to their feet after being taken down. He'll just take you down again. There a couple years ago, I did a podcast with Francis Marshall. No, not Francis Marshall. Why am I Elliot Marshall, head coach Elliot Marshall, and we were breaking down an Anthony Hernandez fight, and I called Hernandez a poor man's Cain Velasquez, and I got ridiculed that night. But people are starting to see it. He fights with that, just that high wrestling, high volume style of just wearing opponents down, taking them down so he forces them to get back up, because that almost takes more energy than just lying on their back, and then he takes them down again. And then he threatens with that front choke series as well, which forces opponents to roll back to their back, and then he's able to get some more control time from that top position. His durability was an issue earlier on in his career, but it seems like he's really starting to address that. It might get tested here against Dolidze, who's going to be looking to land some big shots. But I think Hernandez can force Dolidze into these scrambling positions, set a high pace, set a high volume, and really work Dolidze down, and then give us a classic Anthony Hernandez main event round finish. Hernandez round 4, Hernandez round 5. I think it probably comes by submission. Probably it could come by TKO as well. If Dolidze has the submission defense down, maybe Hernandez just finds that spot where he can posture up and land some big strikes from that top position. But I really expect Hernandez to wear Dolidze down, break him. Dolidze is usually hard to break, but given Hernandez's style, he breaks almost everybody. And I'm expecting him to do the same thing here against Dolidze. So give me Hernandez round 4, Hernandez round 5. I'm going to say by submission, but I'd probably just take those round 4, round 5 props straight up instead, and maybe look to parlay Hernandez somewhere. But I do like Hernandez. I think he continues to showcase why he's one of the best middleweights on the planet, and I think he gets it done in main event rounds. There you guys go. Full card breakdown for UFC Vegas 109. It is great to be back in the studio. It is great to be looking great with the lighting and the camera and the backdrop and all that good stuff finally coming together since the move. Appreciate the understanding. Appreciate you bearing with me and the patience. But yeah, we back, baby. Hopefully continuing this crazy run that we're on profiting on events as well. All right, I'll be back tomorrow for the top 3 lock of the night candidates, as well as the chalk or not segment for this UFC Vegas 109 card. I'll see you guys then. Peace.